Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere.
Welcome everybody back to the Pursuit Pod. Of course, I am your host, Calvin Lymper, and I'm very sorry that I'm in this very discombobulated environment right now. The study room that I usually record these videos in at my dorm building here at Clemson, they got rid of all the furniture in the room, and there's literally no way to record in there unless I was literally just like propped it up, standing up with the microphone, which would be very uncomfortable for the 40 plus minutes that I usually record these episodes for. So I'm in a random room I could find. So again, sorry if you pay attention that closely to the background of the videos. So we got an Ethernet cable here. We got a cord right here. So just bear with me for this episode, especially hopefully that we can get that room back, but it's fine either way. So yeah, we've had a big week in sports per usual. I mean, baseball spring training finally starting up, the national games starting up, basketball's back, it's been back, hockey's been back, things starting to ramp up with the NHL trade deadline. We have a jam-packed episode this week for episode 14, I believe this is, and so I think just per usual, let's just roll right into it with the Roundball Rock section. And to start out, there's been some heavy debate within college basketball. I know I haven't really talked college basketball outside of Clemson in the past few weeks, but I think it's important to talk about just a team that's been making absolutely national headlining news, and that would be Miami, Ohio. Miami, Ohio there's a big question of whether or not they deserve the tournament, especially with the fact that they are on pace to be one of the only undefeated D1 basketball teams in history, which is absolutely nuts. And I think that, this is a Miami, Ohio team that they fought to even be ranked. The fact that they're kind of holding strong and like in the 2025 spot, it's just absurd. And there really is the question, and there was Bruce Pearl went on national TV and he was talking about, if we're going to think about having Miami, Ohio in the tournament, then we should really give a thought to Auburn. And it's just like, it was one of those things that's like, all right, where's the correlation lie? But there is the conversation to be had, and especially within the biases of the tournament committee and picking the different teams that end up participating in the tournament, especially in the fact of the question that if Bruce Pearl is right in his assumption that this Auburn team that really is just so mid, they shouldn't make the tournament under any circumstance unless they go out and win all the SEC tournament, but should non-Power 5 schools even make the tournament at all? And I know it's an absurdist question, but think about the arguments against Miami, Ohio. This is a team that the thing is about college sports and just sports in general. You are given the schedule that you're given the schedule that you're given. And yeah, they might have a pretty low in the 300s of strength of schedule, sure, but you still are given this schedule, and teams below you in strength of schedule that have easier schedules, quote unquote, these are teams that aren't undefeated. Teams that have higher strength of schedules that are a little tougher are not undefeated. Miami, Ohio is undefeated. It would be a different question if they were the absolutely easiest schedule, and maybe they are in terms of, the power strength of their team. Maybe they do have the, lowest strength of schedule just when you weigh it with everything else, especially now with them being ranked and everything. But the biggest question is just, can you really punish a team for winning? And I almost think that this argument against Miami, Ohio, especially those that believe that they shouldn't be in the tournament or that they shouldn't be anything higher than just a conference tournament winner, that's the thing. Every other 29 plus an O team, like 29 wins plus, they were a 1 seed. And now, let's put Auburn in Miami, Ohio's schedule. Are they undefeated? Let's put the worst Power 5 schools. Let's put the teams that are the absolute bottom of the barrel. Let's put those teams that they're going to be, first round exits in their conference tournament. Those guys that only have a few wins in their conference. If they're given Miami, Ohio's schedule, are they going to go undefeated? I don't think so. And Miami, Ohio isn't a team that's going to be, the national tournament winners. Maybe they are. Maybe they actually do go in the tournament and end up winning the whole thing. But it's just, the conversation lies in, are we really just not going to give any, leeway to these non-Power 5 schools? It's almost the conversation with Tulane and James Madison back in the college football playoff, and that being, is there a point to even try to shove them in to the college football playoff? And especially with, it's just, that they're probably going to get destroyed by whatever competition they played, but it's still fair to give them their efforts and give them the potential for success. And is it just fair to not allow them a shot in the dance just because they just so happen to be a group of 5 school? They just so happen to be a mid-major school. Like, God forbid this was Miami, Florida, right? Just change the state. It's Miami, Florida. This is a team that you'd be saying, oh, they're runaway number 1 seed. What even doesn't matter the strength of schedule. But that's the conversation right now. I think personally, and I was talking to my boy about this, I think you should let them be a 5 or 6 seed. That way you're playing, I think actually a 6 seed would be the perfect spot to put Miami, Ohio, especially if they go undefeated. They should definitely get in that large bid in the tournament because they're undefeated. They took advantage of the schedule they had, and they won out with it. Ultimately won out all the way. And that's the thing. If you put them as a 6 seed, that means that you're facing the bubble at-large teams, the teams that are going to be like Indiana, for example, for this year. They're going to be facing those 11 seeds that are the last at-large, like actually good teams to make the tournament. When you have them play against them, then there you go. The Bruce Pearl argument will literally stand the test of time. It'll literally stand, and you'll see that become a game itself. It will be, maybe a team like Auburn as the last 4-in team that won the first 4 game versus Miami, Ohio, and then you actually have the showdown between those 2 programs to see if Miami, Ohio really is better and deserves that at-large bid, because there you go. You're facing a team that is quote-unquote better because they're Power 5, because they have this schedule, that schedule, whatever. Either way, I think that Miami, Ohio wins out. Yeah, I don't think they're a top 4 seed, just logistically. I think just quad wins and resume-wise, but you put them at a 6 seed and they get to play a first 4 team, or they get to play the last 4 in, then I think that's a perfect spot for Miami to be. And if I'm a tournament selector and I'm doing the selection show, I would put them in that 5 to 6 seed range, just because I think that that's the fairest way to evaluate them and to see how far they would have actually gone. Otherwise, if Miami, Ohio isn't in the tournament this year, especially if they go undefeated, then we're ultimately just facing the NCAA trying to erase any school that's not Power 5, and that's just the truth, and you can't argue with that, in my opinion. Other news for the NBA, or I guess just for basketball in general, would be the Zion Williamson interview recently, where he comes out about his struggles in his NBA career, talking about people criticizing him for not caring, and the fact that he wishes that people saw the opposite, and that he actually does care a decent bit about, him playing. It's just the different, it's almost the Rondale Moore angle that I'm trying to approach here. It's a player that wants to be on the court, wants to be on the field, but he can't. He's forced to be on the sideline. It eats you up inside. Literally, Zion Williamson ended up having weight issues because he's so committed. He's putting his body on the line every game to play, and he can't play because of whatever his body's allowing him. And it sucks to hear injury-prone guys talk about like Derrick Rose, but Zion Williamson, ultimately, he's a 25-year-old, and he's averaging 21.5 points per game in 45 games this season. Overall, he thinks that the injuries helped him grow as a pro, and that it was an ultimately a blessing in disguise. And I think that that's a really important way to look at it, especially with, just the fact that you can grow mentally from it. And some people can't grow mentally from it, but some people can have that perseverance to go beyond their body's capabilities and to be able to push through it. You guys like Joel Embiid, for example, especially in that article about him. It's just, we talked about that with the Rondale Moore news last week, but the fact that these guys just push through so much and that it really is just a drainer overall that you're dealing with this kind of a thing. Just, and your whole contract, you're getting money to be able to play, and the fact that there's just times where your body doesn't let you, and it's just so unfair. And that's what you saw with Derrick Rose and guys like maybe guys like Zion at the end of their career that might just, they're coming back around, but they might just fall off a cliff at the end of the day. Lastly, for the Roundball Rock section, I know this is a very uniquely short section compared to what we usually have here for NBA discussion, and that would be the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think that they've completely taken up their role of being the villains in the NBA. They've transformed from one of the most exciting stories, the zero to hero, the ultimate zero to hero team and story in the NBA, with the only, trust the process kind of tanking actually going right until the Sixers inevitably win the championship this year. But that's a story for another day. That's a story for if they actually go ahead and do such a thing. But there was the whole thing about Lou Dort intentionally tripping Nikola Jokic on a leg that already had a bum knee. Shea is criticized by Doris Burke for his excessive push-offs. And I almost think maybe it is because, the NBA will always kind of punish the teams that are good because they're going to get more exposure. And furthermore, they're going to get more exposure, and then furthermore, they're going to get more hatred overall. You saw that with the Warriors. I was a big part of that. I hated on the Warriors when they were first around. I did not want them to, continue winning, and they did, and I had to just accept it. That kind of deal is kind of what we're seeing with the Thunder. And the Thunder are not far and away the best team that they really seemed to be at the beginning of the year. And I really think that it was just the anti-NBA Finals hangover. I think that it was more just the fact they actually have a pretty sound roster buildup, but they're not even the best team in the NBA at this point, with the Pistons being there and the other teams that are kind of sneaking up to the Thunder all of a sudden now. So I think that we definitely have a new conversation starting for who to root for as a general fan of the NBA, and I think the Thunder are beginning to fall off, and their wheels are starting to spin out when it comes to likability. And I think that, again, maybe it's just because they won the championship. Maybe it's just because they actually did the impossible and did this whole zero to hero tanking thing, and it actually worked out pretty well for them. But I think overall that it just happens to be, the fact that they actually do have some dirty players, especially with Lou Dort. Again, a guy that was loved before, and it's just going down the deep end in Oklahoma City, but they're still a great team. So now moving on to the 4th and 4 segment, which is going to be a bigger one because NFL free agency is finally approaching. The franchise tag period is over, to my belief, and time to start talking about the NFL draft. But to start out, the first major trade of this free agency period, and that would be David Montgomery in a trade to the Houston Texans. And Montgomery is a guy that I've always said, maybe it's just because I had him in fantasy for like 3 years straight, but he is a running back one on any team that he could go to, in my opinion. And the problem in Houston isn't their running game, it's just this god-awful offensive line, which they actually traded away pieces and depth of their offensive line to go back to the Lions. But, they got a steal in Monty, and he does actually, at 29 years old, he has less miles on him just because of the splitting backfield with Gibbs. And the question now lies on what will this do for a promising Woody Marks, who is still developing, and will Woody Marks be the new David Montgomery, ironically, for David Montgomery? And that's just kind of, Montgomery really played a shield role when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs and his development, that they let Gibbs kind of be the RB1. They let whatever happen, but David Montgomery is a player that is just so special, and I think that he made so much out of his little usage in Detroit. I know he was a big goal line stand player. He was a big fantasy killer, but overall, he's a player that was on the Lions for a reason. He was their entrusted RB2 for a reason. He probably would have stayed there as their RB2 for a reason because he contributes to winning football. But I mean, again, it's just you want to let Gibbs kind of take over, especially the fact that he actually does have his promise and that Montgomery is starting to age out a little bit. He's going to be 29, and that's, it's starting to be the time where you really make or break your career as a running back, especially because you are the most replaceable position in the NFL, especially with age. And if you get older, you're going to hit the can and you're going to get canned more often. So it's really just going to be a tale of what they do with him and Woody Marks in Houston. But I like David Montgomery. I don't mind the Texans, so I think this is a really fun trade, and I'm excited that this is the first showing and the first trade that we're going to see for this offseason, especially in the NFL. So the next conversation would be just, I guess the last conversation would be the quarterback carousel that we're about to see here in the NFL with free agency about to begin. And got the news that Kyler Murray was cut by the Arizona Cardinals. Tua Tagovailoa is expected to be cut unless he gets an immediate trade. And then there's this wild card coming in of Malik Willis. Our team's really truly willing to take a major leap on Malik Willis over two actually decently proven quarterbacks in Tua and Kyler. And now this is just where the questions lie. And you got teams like the Vikings who they like Tua and Kyler, especially with having career revivalist Kevin O'Connell as their head coach now. But Tua might have bad blood with Brian Flores as DC. And then there's a conversation for the Dolphins with Tua that they could go down the Brock Osweiler path with approaching getting rid of him. They could take his salary plus give away a good draft pick, and there's just going to be too much dead cap for the Dolphins to take in a release scenario. But I was talking to someone about the possibility of Kyler Murray going to the Atlanta Falcons, and I think that would be a very, very interesting scenario for Kyler that's kind of taken just such an explosive offense in Atlanta with Bijan, and they have Drake London. If they tagged Kyle Pitts, they're gonna bring him back, that kind of deal. They have a pretty fun offense incoming, especially they have a new coaching staff coming in. But the biggest question is probably just what is the role of quarterback development. You're seeing less and less quarterbacks be given patience and be given a chance to actually grow and a chance to actually. Every team is trying to be win now right now, and that's another thing is, and especially this kind of ties into the whole Malik Willis hype train that's been ongoing randomly here in the NFL, and that would be that there is just this draft especially is more of a lackluster one for QBs, and I mean besides Mendoza, but even he's not the strongest number one overall pick of all time, so that could be leading to people wanting to take a chance on a younger quarterback like Malik Willis. Understandably, he's completed 80% of his passes with 300 plus rushing yards in 11 games in the past 2 seasons, coming off the bench as well, starting a few of those. My question is, how sustainable is that success with him only really being a backup for the most part? And it's just, the answer is, it's all just a part of this whole trend of reclamation projects. And that being, maybe the most enticing thing in the NFL after Daniel Jones had an arguably MVP season to start out last year. Sam Darnold just won a Super Bowl in Seattle and had an amazing year in Minnesota the year before. My question is, why wouldn't you take this a step further? And instead of, going to Malik Willis, a guy who's, he's been in the league long enough. He's been here for a few years now. He is a veteran, quote unquote, but why not capitalize on trying to keep doing these, potential career turnaround reclamation projects with Kyler or Tua? These are both players that have had Pro Bowl years. These are both guys that have shown that when they have the weapons around them, they can compete. I think Kyler to a bigger extent than Tua, but the point still stands. Why not, try to target maybe a cheaper option in Kyler and Tua, having both maybe at least Tua maybe, but Kyler definitely just both getting cut by their respective teams. Why try to go in for Malik Willis? So I've heard a report that he is worth $30 million per year, which I think is absurd. And I mean, I see the hype in the tape, but I don't know if I see the hype as a, franchise leader in Malik Willis. And that's going to be something that I will be very curious to see, just to see what teams do in that realm of quarterback signings and what they're going to try to approach there with that. I think, I really do think that the biggest quarterback free agent now is Kyler Murray, especially the fact that you don't have to trade for him. You don't have to give any assets back to Cardinals. I almost think that Kyler could go, we talked about him last week, but Dolphins, again, I like Falcons, honestly, a lot. The Colts, even if they really do want to move past Daniel Jones, the Vikings are going to be probably the biggest I need a quarterback team in free agency this year, so it's going to be a very interesting story to keep a watch and an eye out on. So especially stay tuned for if Tua and Kyler end up being the next reclamation projects for guys that were huge prospects, and then they come out, had bad start to their careers, but they showed talent, they showed promise, but then they're going to end up coming back probably. I'm just rooting for Kyler. I like Kyler's game. I've always been a fan of the undersized quarterback, rushing quarterback kind of deal. And that 2021 year with him and D-Hop was just so fun to watch. So to move on to the hockey discussion for the week, you got to talk about the trade deadline coming up. And Austin Nivison, who's an author, made a list of 8 players who will be headliners on the move this trade deadline, so I will dedicate this segment of the pod to listing these 8 players, and if there are some ESPN recommended deals to do with them. So to start out, Vincent Trocheck, who's a center for the New York Rangers. Right now he has 38 points with 12 goals on the year, and he's able to produce highly for a very Rangers team. And he's definitely in position to be a second or third line center for any contender that is looking to, bolster themselves a little bit. He's only 32 years old, and he has a $5.6 million cap hit on 3 more years on his contract. He has a bad expected goal share in 5-on-5 scenarios, which may give some contenders pause to actually, go in and buy for him, especially with the age, but ESPN stated that their mock trade that makes sense for him would be Trocheck gets sent to the Minnesota Wild for a 2027 first, 2028 second, Carson Lambos, and Charlie Stramel, which will, it brings Trocheck into the defensive structure in Minnesota as he's a two-way center, as well as, the fact that he is trusted in any given scenario in the playoffs. And plus, it'll give the Rangers back 2 prospects, continue their rebuild, and continue their, stocking up for the future. So this makes really a lot of sense to me, and this would be a very interesting trade to see if it happens. Nazem Kadri, who is a center in Calgary for the Flames, he has 41 points this season with 12 goals. He, similarly to Trocheck, can bring middle six potential to a contender. Plus, he has Stanley Cup winning experience, but he is 35 years old with a $7 million per year contract and cap hit. So he might be, a little less pricey than Trocheck. Or I guess maybe just with more money, it might be a little harder to get, a little harder to bring into the scheme. But Kadri could be trying to go for one more shot at the Stanley, which would be very interesting. Jordan Kyrou, who is a right winger for the St. Louis Blues. Right now in this season, he has 33 points with 14 goals. He has a career low in shooting percentage this season, but he is leading the Blues with 62.5% expected goal share in 5-on-5 scenarios. He's still 27 years old with 5 years left on his contract. And honestly, Kyrou is a very underrated player for how low his asking price is. And honestly, will it get any lower before the trade deadline? So I think that if you're a contender and you want to bring in a winger like that, who, again, he leads his team in expected goal share, but he is shooting low this season. I think that a contender should take the chance on this and grab him while he's low. Elias Pettersson, who is a center for the Canucks, and we've mentioned him before as a Flyers candidate, 35 points with 13 goals. He's a former 100-point player, but definitely had a massive fall off within the past few years, especially for this year. He will have a massive $11.6 million salary crunch, which is a gamble, especially for the Canucks to eat salary without giving away prospects, but Pettersson could definitely add to contending hockey, especially, just away from the Canucks, but it would definitely be interesting to see where he goes. And again, I said I wanted him for the Flyers if we could get him in any potential deal, but it would definitely be a little more expensive just with his cap hit. So, and especially with what the Canucks are trying to build for the future. So, Ryan O'Reilly, a center for the Nashville Predators, is maybe the hottest commodity on the trade deadline market this year at this current time. He has 57 points with 21 goals. Again, 35 years old, just like Kadri, but he also has Stanley Cup experience. He's known to play any scenario effectively, especially for that in the playoffs. But the issue is for any trade talks is that there is no center depth behind him right now in Nashville, which really could be the question for the Predators if they even want to sell him away to another team, because they just sit right outside the wild card race in the West. ESPN has O'Reilly being sent to Colorado for 2027 first and other picks as a very must-win move for Colorado, with what would be their best team since their Stanley Cup team a few years back. It would help them round out their center depth, bring them a reliable scoring, bring them just, in general, a good bolstering that could really make them, if they're not already, a pretty stronger threat to the Stanley Cup. So Jesper Wallstedt, the backup goalie in Minnesota right now in the season, he has a 91.3 save percentage, 2.76 goals allowed on average, only 23 years old, but he's shown massive potential. But the thing about him and that makes him a trade deadline candidate would be the fact that the Wild already entrust Philip Gustafsson for the long run. So moving Wallstedt would bring back, any top six forward for Minnesota playoff push and bring him maybe to a cellar that needs a goalie for the future. He also only has 1 year left on his contract. So if I'm the Minnesota Wild, I would definitely flip him for a forward if I could, and just anything that I could add to bring me on with the playoff push, because I would trust Gustafsson to be my netminder for the playoffs. So the last two on the list are Mackenzie Weegar, who is a defenseman from also Calgary Flames. Right now he has 21 points with 3 goals, and the most alarming statistic is that he's a negative 26 goal differential on 5-on-5, but he is still a strong top 4 defenseman, and 32 years old with a $6.25 million cap hit on, and that's for each of the 5 years that's left in his contract. And I mean, overall, the deal to give him away from Calgary would be unlikely, just because of the Rasmus Andersson deal to Vegas earlier in the season, and overall they would just have an exponentially thin line, blue line. So definitely probably the least likely player on the list, but any candidate is a candidate. So, and lastly, probably the second biggest trade market candidate besides O'Reilly would be Robert Thomas, the center out in St. Louis, who I mentioned before. Again, another Flyers candidate. 33 points with 11 goals. He's 26 years old. Big playmaker center, has good, he has good playoff experience. He's a great top 6 forward. He's potentially a number 1 center for a team that still needs it if they're trying to buy for the playoffs. The Flyers, I'm just saying. And he will also actually have the no trade clause in his contract, but it definitely a high market for him. And there's 2 trades that ESPN believes that he could be a part of, and that would be that he gets sent to Carolina, the Hurricanes, for a 2026 first. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Alexander Nikki Shin, and Ryan Suzuki, which would bring Carolina a scoring anchor that can be their biggest need in the playoff due to a lack of needed clutch scoring that has bit them in the behind the past few years in the playoffs, despite being number one seeds, despite being these big candidates to actually win the Stanley Cup. And there's also the trade the Bruins get him and Justin Folk for Dean Letourneau, Mason Lowry, Casey Middlestad, Michael Asimont, and a 2027 first, which would be another interesting deal. And I mean, overall, there's not really much else going on in the NHL right now besides just the playoff race is sparking up. And with that, I think it's best that we transition to our dear Flyers talk, which I'm actually a happy camper for this week, and that's because the Flyers have rolled 3 wins in a row after matches versus Toronto, New York, and Boston. They've now earned a point in the last 6 of 7 games now, and it's been a very crowded Eastern Conference standing so far, especially with this look of the Flyers having 67 points, and they're only 4 under the Bruins, who they actually just beat for that last wild card spot, and that was looking as if they were almost completely out of the Eastern Conference in general, and now they're right there, but they are rising up quick, but there's still some work to be done because they have a pretty tough schedule upcoming. They're playing, especially immediately, they're going to be playing a very hungry Mammoth team. They have the Penguins after that, which is just, they've kind of jumped us in the standings, and right now every game counts. Every second counts if you ever watch The Bear, and I think the Flyers are still going to be able to dig themselves out of this hole, which I would not have been saying last week. So there's still a shining glimmer of hope, and I was telling my buddy that my prediction is that we're going to win just enough to maybe get that first spot in the wild card spot, and then right as we kind of seem like, hey, we made it, we did it, we're going to lose out, and then we're going to get out of there in the most Philadelphia Flyers-esque way possible. To continue on with the Phanatic discussion, for the Eagles, quick news, and that's the report that Dallas Goedert is almost certainly out of Philadelphia this offseason, but there is discussions and headlines talking about us possibly getting David Njoku, which would be not an upgrade, to say the least, but it definitely would be a pretty fine replacement. And I think that if Goddard, it really is wrong. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen before, that he might come back, but if he really is gone, then I think that getting Njoku would be huge for us to kind of retain that and for us to bring in a tight end of that quality back into Philadelphia to take care of that hole that Goddard will leave. Lastly, for the Phanatic, the Sixers, they just got demolished by the San Antonio Spurs. Overall, just kind of a midweek for us. They won over the Heat to extend their winning streak going into the week to 3, and then they lost big versus the Celtics at home in a game that just never pointed Philadelphia's direction. But here is some good notes, and this is aided by some analysis from Adam Aronson of Philly Voice, a online publication about Philadelphia sports. And VJ Edgecombe, our star rookie, is becoming more of a breakthrough transition scorer. He has newfound aggressiveness in the open floor. He's utilizing his quickness to create such fast break scoring opportunities and chances. And I overall just think that this proves VJ's coachable responsibility. And that's just from the fact that he stated that he was told that he needed to punch the gaps, and he did exactly that. Overall, I think that he just still needs to improve bottom barrel efficiency, especially in his at-rim finishing. I mean, we saw him, he still hasn't really been able to finish those highlight reel dunks that he's been trying to get all season. So still ways to improve, which, I mean, he's a rookie, so it makes sense. But still some things to improve for the young guy. But overall, he's breaking through out of his own, and he's becoming an amazing transition scorer, one of the best in the NBA. Just has little things to tweak, but again, he's a rookie, so there will be growth. But Sixers still looking fine. Philly sports is kind of in a weird spot right now, and I'm not the most crazy hyped up for the Phillies right now at the end of the day. So we'll have to just see what happens, I guess. Now to finish off the podcast, it's been a shorter one overall, but some big news when it comes to the Clemson Corner would be that Clemson finally won a game. They upset number 20 Louisville at Little John 80-75 in what Griffin Barfield, the former sports editor of the Tiger and now working for Sports Illustrated, called their biggest win of the year. They snapped a 4-game losing slide, and they boosted their net rankings with their second-ranked win of the year and grabbing another Quad 1 win to essentially lock them into the tournament after the 3-game losing streak had Tigers fans worried that they probably would have slid out. I mean, they fell to a potential 9 seed now, but they showed good defensive prowess, just limiting Louisville to an overall field goal percentage of 45.3%, and it comes with none other than 16 second-half points from the man himself, Justin Porter, the guy this is just so well needed after horrendous, just to say the least, and inconsistent guard play all year. And again, this was especially big in the losing slide and the fact that the guards could never get anything really going. So to see him kind of perform in the clutch like that is pretty big. But right now we still sit at 35 in the net post that Louisville win, but after the UNC loss, which was just so close, and I think the fact that we played that game so close and the fact that we actually had that showing against them, it was pretty big. It was pretty huge, and I think that loss stung. It definitely stung because the opportunity was there. We went for the 2 instead of the 3, and we missed that easy shot, but we still boast a 5-6 Quad 1 record, and we're still holding 6-2 in Quad 2. We have no Quad 4 losses, but we have a Quad 3 loss with Florida State, so we still overall have a tournament resume, and I think that, again, our floor is a 9 seed. We're kind of rocking with a 9 seed right now, but hopefully the ACC tournament will come around and we can actually get up to a higher seed, maybe boost ourselves to an 8 seed, maybe turn some heads in the ACC tournament as our last chance to, make or break our tournament chances, because we were riding such an amazing high in the middle and the beginning of this season. To finish out the Clemson Corner, I guess just talk about some football again. Cade Klubnik has officially hit the draft combine and attempting to make some waves and placing his name back at the top of the quarterback prospect list for the NFL draft. He only took part in on-field throwing activities and abilities, but he was praised for the zip of the ball and his accuracy, and praised for plenty of arm strength to easily hit tight windows. Overall given an A- and placed in number 4 of Sporting News' list for quarterback candidates in the combine, and so he will be listed under Ty Simpson, Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier, who outperformed him in the season opener for combine performances, and I will be having an article coming out for the Tiger upcoming talking about, where Klubnik as an NFL player would lie, where his strengths and weaknesses in his scouting, why he kind of took a dip overall as a prospect through the year, but just overall, and I guess I'll spoil it a little bit by saying that I compared him to career backups, guys that come in and start every now and then, but guys like Gardner Minshew, and I kind of put my hat in the ring for nicknames to give him that kind of are like the Minshew Magic deal, but just overall, he's going to be a day 3 guy, definitely, and because I don't see Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier being drafted, round 3, 4. I think that Klubnik's going to be a round 5, round 6 guy, if at all. I think that, again, he gets his best chance to play on the Cardinals. He gets his best chance to play on the New York Jets, where they started Brady Cook last year, so why wouldn't they start Cade or bring him in the running in that quarterback competition? So it's going to be a very interesting draft for Clemson players, especially after a year like this where we underperformed, to see where the prospects actually go, especially with Cade. And hopefully this will end the mediocrity of the quarterback play as of late, and we can actually get going with, some, top end elite quarterbacks like we had with Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. So that'll be it for this week's Pursuit Pod. And I'm sorry that it was a kind of a shorter week. I'm still also recovering from sickness. And overall, we're still kind of in that weird transition period of just sports in general. And there's, NHL trade deadline isn't really having a lot of crazy news happening as of right now. We're still kind of waiting in the wind for that. Then it's going to be playoff race. NBA, it's just, not a lot of crazy stuff because, we were spoiled the last few weeks with the KD files. We were spoiled the last few weeks with the whole Cade MVP thing, and especially with the next week and the weeks coming, we're going to be talking March Madness, and I'm going to be giving my official bracket to everybody. So I'm super hyped for that. This last weekend, I was able to, I was at the Louisville Clemson game, helping out with the video board camera work there, and I was able to catch some softball, doing some camera work for them against Mississippi State, which we got killed, unfortunately, but our softball team is pretty solid. They're just kind of going back and forth, winning games, losing games pretty badly, pretty good. So Clemson baseball went against South Carolina in a big series after South Carolina kind of embarrassed themselves, winning against us 7-0, and then celebrating like it was the Super Bowl. So overall, just an interesting time in sports. And it is jam-packed, but as for big stories to actually discuss, not the craziest thing going on, but I'm very excited for March Madness to be coming up, and I'm very excited for, I will say it's just, the weather here has just been absolutely bonkers. So we go from, it's going to be up to like 75 degrees at a high today, and then it's going to go to, I believe, it'll be like 80 degrees plus through the rest of the week. And then just yesterday we were hit with yesterday and the day before we were hit with 40 degrees days. So I'm hoping we can actually find some balance here because I don't want to be sick anymore. And that's it. That's kind of my ramble for this week. As always, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for listening to me kind of just ramble on my spiel about the sports that I love and the people that I love and the teams. And I do, again, love the dedication to listening and that you guys will always support me. And so I hope you guys all have a great upcoming week and a great weekend upcoming. And Clemson spring break will also be upcoming, so I'm super pumped for that. So to end off this episode, of course, go Tigers, per usual. Go Sixers, go Flyers, go Phils because they're starting up. And go Birds. Hopefully we do something this free agency. Thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all later.